Okay, I guess that we can start. Dr. Colombo, if you agree.
Yes, maybe if the other participants arrive, we'll join later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, good morning to everyone. I would like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation and public relations for its support. In particular, I would like to thank Dr. Teresa Colombo for her kindest support during the preparation of this meeting. The outline of our meeting during this morning and during this afternoon. During the first part of our meeting, we will discuss about the characteristics of the systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Yesterday, you had the chance to assess the quality of a randomized controlled trial, and during the first day, together with Professor Aliberti, you had the chance to assess the characteristics of an observational study, as well as the main indication recommendation for the preparation of a scientific article. Let's try to understand where the systematic reviews are in the context of the medical publication. During the second part of our meeting in the afternoon, you'll study the article I sent you, a systematic review and meta-analysis focus on the therapy of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. This paper, this article was published in the Lancet a few years ago, and it is the basis for the current guidelines of the American Thoracic Society, the European Respiratory Society, the Infectious Disease Society of America, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. After more or less 2 hours, you should prepare a PowerPoint file, as you did since the first day. This file will be discussed together. You should evaluate the pros and cons of the study described in the article I sent you. And then you have summarized the pros and cons of this article. But before going into details, I would like to provide a short lecture on the systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Now I share my screen together with you with my PPT file. Okay. Can you see my PPT file?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you so much for your feedback. Okay, so I would like to show you the current scenario of the medical publication. That is where we are. We are living the evidence-based medicine era, the so-called EBM. But the first question should be, what is the evidence-based medicine? This picture shows Dave Sackett. Dave Sackett was a physician and a greatest scientist who published a paper, an article a few years ago in 1996 in the British Medical Journal. And the title of that article was Evidence-Based Medicine, What It Is and What It Isn't. He described the concept of the evidence-based medicine. He stated that the evidence-based medicine means the use of the best scientific evidence during a specific time period. the best scientific evidence should be used when we want to make decisions about the care of patients. And its concept relies on the combination or on the integration of the best scientific evidence we could retrieve from medical journals and the clinical expertise following the assessment of clinical case during our professional career. He stated that the best scientific evidence should be evaluated after a comprehensive and a systematic research. However, the process of integration is more complex. As you can see here, focus your attention on the figure. The integration, the combination should include another important component, that is patient values and expectations. Then we should consider the best external evidence, the clinical expertise and the patient choices. We have a complicated process because integration means an intellectual combination of those three spheres, of those three pillars. Then evidence-based medicine, as he said, is not a cookbook medicine. So it means that medicine cannot fit the line one size fits all. Every time we should assess a patient, we should prepare a specific recipe, which is different if compared with others used in the past for other patients, based on the biological assumption of the clinical variability, which depends on a dynamic process. But when we wanted to describe the external scientific evidence, one of the previously described spheres, pillars in the definition of evidence-based medicine given by Dave Sackett, we should focus our attention on this triangle, the triangle or the pyramid of the scientific evidence. Several documents describing the scientific evidence can be found in the medical scientific journals. However, they can show a different quality. This triangle describes the different scientific quality of the available studies. The level of quality depends on the pros and cons, on the advantages and disadvantages mainly related to the study design. At the bottom, the lowest quality, you can find expert opinions, which are mainly based on the clinical skills and expertise of the clinician working in a specific field. Then you can find the individual case reports. That is the description of only one case. One patient, based on the variability we discussed about during the presentation of the previous slide, cannot be considered representative of an entire statistical population. Same issue, more or less, for the case series. That is the description of a few cases, 5, 10, or less than 20. Then the following step is represented by the observational studies. When we talk about observational studies, we have two main subgroups, the ecological and the analytical studies. The analytical studies, which try to study the relationship, which we call association, between an exposure and an outcome, for instance, tobacco smoking and lung cancer, can be cross-sectional or prevalence studies, case control studies, and longitudinal or incidence or cohort studies. What is the main feature of the observational studies? The role played by the investigator is passive. He or she, the investigator, observes the natural history of a disease following the exposure to a factor, a risk factor, and then we assess the outcome disease or outcome health. The following step higher in this triangle is represented by the experimental studies. We can have randomized and non-randomized control studies. The aim of this type of studies is the assessment of an intervention, for instance, a therapeutic or a preventive intervention, a drug or a vaccine. We wanted to assess the role played by the intervention on a specific clinical condition, and then we evaluate the outcome. We want to assess the efficacy, but also the safety and tolerability of a new intervention in comparison with the efficacy, safety, and tolerability of a placebo or of a standard of care. In this specific case, the role of the investigators, of the researchers, is active because he or she defines the selection criteria for the enrollment of the cases. And finally, at the tip of this triangle of the pyramid, we have the systematic reviews and meta-analysis. They could be defined a sort of collection of all the scientific evidence, both observational and experimental. We can have systematic reviews of observational studies or systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials, or in some instances, the systematic reviews combining both observational and experimental studies. These systematic reviews can be described as I said, the collection of all the individual studies published on a specific topic. Single studies are the pieces of a puzzle we want to combine in order to assess a large picture, then to better understand the variability of a clinical phenomenon. During the previous decades, before the year 1990, scientific journals published narrative reviews in the majority of the cases, and only a few systematic reviews. Now we have a lot of systematic reviews and less narrative reviews. But what is the narrative reviews? What is the difference between a narrative and a systematic review? The narrative review describes a topic, but the collection of the scientific evidence is arbitrary and depends on the scientists, on the researchers involved in the paper as co-authors. They can choose the scientific evidence they prefer, and then they draw conclusions. The disadvantages, the cons, are mainly related to the subjectivity of the choices and the absence, the lack of a transparency on the criteria adopted for the selection of the scientific evidence. So here we have the risk, the high risk of a publication bias. And the main question for a reader is, this heterogeneous, asymmetrical choice of this scientific evidence can be related to a conflict of interest. Furthermore, they can easily lose their scientific value when more new evidence becomes available. Then from mid-1980s, scientists start to abandon narrative reviews for systematic reviews. So what is the official definition of a systematic reviews? The systematic review summarizes the scientific evidence retrieved from the scientific literature. It systematically evaluates the scientific evidence using explicit and replicable methods. Moreover, when it is possible, objective statistical techniques are used to analyze the findings of the individual studies. What are the advantages of a systematic review when this type of publication is compared with a narrative review focused on the same aim? First, the systematic reviews reduce the bias associated to a partial search of the scientific literature, being based on a systematic approach to data collection and analysis of published and sometimes unpublished research. It increases the methodological rigor using specific scientific standards. And furthermore, it adopts ad hoc statistical techniques, providing quantitative results and allowing inference of the individual studies pulled together. However, before writing a systematic review, before performing a systematic review, we should prepare a protocol. There should be a protocol. Every research, both observational or experimental, should be based on a protocol. And the systematic review should be based on a protocol. The protocol should describe the methodology, including the analytical phase of the study. And the protocol is only a priori description of the process. The publication of the protocol and its assessment by some reviewers is key, because it prevents arbitrary decisions, including selective reporting. It can reduce unintended applications and support the creation of collaborative groups. So the preparation of a protocol is an advantage for the researchers and for the scientific community. A protocol can help plan carefully and can anticipate potential problems. The reviewers of the protocol can assess easily what has been planned by the researchers, and the readers can compare the content of the protocol and the findings of the review. Others can replicate the methods and assess the quality of the methodology. In this specific case, arbitrary decisions can be avoided, evaluating the inclusion and exclusion criteria, as well as the methods adopted for data extraction. In the methods section of the article of focus on a systematic review, you can find the PRISMA. PRISMA is an acronym which means preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. It was developed only for systematic reviews of randomized control trials, but now it is used for every systematic review. Focus your attention on this important tool because the assessment of the article I sent you is based on the assessment of the 27 items of the PRISMA. So the PRISMA is a sort of checklist which is based on 27 items and a flow diagram of 4 phases. It can help the authors and the readers to improve the reporting and the assessment of the systematic review. The PRISMA statement was published in the journal PLOS Medicine by Moer and colleagues, several methodologists, and this is the flow diagram with the 4 phases I mentioned a few seconds ago. We have the identification, the screening, the eligibility, and the inclusion of the selected studies. So the first step describes how many records we found through database searching. After the exclusion of duplications collected through at least 2 search databases, at least 2 authors independently screen titles and abstracts of the records. Based on the inclusion and exclusion criteria, some records are excluded. The next step is the assessment of the full test of those previously selected. We can exclude other records after the assessment of the full test. We should list, it is key, the reasons behind those exclusions. The remaining papers, the remaining articles are described qualitatively and quantitatively. The quantitative evaluation corresponds to the meta-analysis. Then the meta-analysis is a part of the systematic review process. However, sometimes it cannot be conducted because the results of the individual studies cannot be combined. Too different. The following, this slide and the following 2 slides describe the 27 items of the PRISMA checklist, starting from the assessment of the title, which should describe the content of the systematic review, highlighting the type of the study carried out by the authors, that is the systematic review. It should be clearly detailed that the article is focused on a systematic review and a meta-analysis. Then the assessment of the abstract, which should have an outline, a structure, including the main elements from the background to the objectives, to the search databases used for the search, the inclusion and exclusion criteria, the description of the statistical population, the intervention and the control, the synthesis methods, the results, the study limitations, the conclusions, the interpretation of the findings, and the registration of the study. For instance, in the most important database used for the registration of the systematic review is Prospero. Then the assessment of the introduction, where we should find the rationale behind the study, which should be supported by a scientifically sound background. The objectives, both primary and secondary objectives, including the framework PICO, which I'm gonna describe in a few minutes. Then we have the items from 5 to 16, focus on the methods. They assess the presence of a protocol and its registration. There should be a specific number. The criteria adopted for the selection of the studies, the search databases used to retrieve the records, and then the scientific evidence, the search strategy, including the keywords and the strings input in the search databases, the description of the selection process, how the authors did collect the data from the individual articles, which variables were collected, the description of methods used to detect and quantify the risk of bias in every selected study, the statistical analysis plan, including additional analysis, for instance, sensitivity or subgroup analysis. The last items are aimed at the results, with the description of the selection process, the general characteristics of the selected studies and of the variables the authors collected, the risk of bias within and across studies, the summary of the meta-analytical approach and of further analysis. Then the discussion with a clear summary of the scientific evidence, with the description of the main findings and their relevance in the scientific scenario. Then it is key to describe the limitation of the systematic review, as well as the limitation of the single studies, and then the conclusion. The description of funding of the funds used for systematic review. So when you will prepare your critical assessment of the article, you should keep into consideration all those 27 items. Prisma, as I told you a few minutes ago, was developed for the assessment of randomized controlled trials, for systematic reviews of randomized controlled trial. But now we have several Prisma, Prisma for abstract, for harm outcomes, individual patient data meta-analysis or network meta-analysis, and for protocols. When we want to perform a systematic review, we should highlight 5 crucial steps for the design. 1. Framing research questions for the review. 2. Identification of the available published evidence. 3. Assessment of the quality of the selected studies. 4. Summary of the scientific evidence. And 5. Interpretation of the results. Framing question for a review. The definition of the research question or research questions relies on the identification of 4 elements. First of all, the statistical population, which is the target of the studies carried out until that moment. The intervention or the exposures we want to compare in case of experimental or observational studies, respectively. The outcomes, that is the changes in health status due to the administration of an intervention or due to the exposure to a risk factor. The effects, which are the measurement of the association relationship between the intervention or the exposure and a specific outcome. Then every research question should be built on a specific framework, identified by the acronym PICO, where P is for patients or population, our statistical population, our population target, I for intervention or exposure, in case we are focusing our attention on experimental or observational studies, C for comparison or control, and O for outcome. How we could perform a search? First of all, we should identify suitable keywords, which should be combined with the Boolean operators. The main operators are, summarizing this slide, or, and not. Or is key for the search of articles containing any of the terms we chose, including the combination of synonyms, and will identify articles containing all of the terms we have chosen, and not excludes concepts increasing the specificity of our search. Here are the examples with the cycles with heart diseases or hypertension. In these cases, we want to retrieve articles including heart diseases or hypertension. When we use and, we want to find articles where the 2 terms, heart diseases and hypertension, can be found together in the same article. And not, where we want to exclude, in this case, congenital heart diseases from the large group of heart diseases. Then the search will be focused on all heart diseases than those which are congenital. The identification of the keywords is a crucial step because we should think about other ways to spell the selected keywords, synonyms, associated keywords, which could have a role in the identification of important articles. The search could be limited by dates, languages. We could, for instance, choose only the English language. Age groups. We can focus our attention on the elderly or pediatric patients. And the type of publications. For instance, we want to select only randomized controlled trials. This slide summarizes some of the most important search databases we can use for the collection of the articles from the US PubMed to Embase, Biomedical Answers, the Cochrane, Web of Science, Scopus, or Google Scholar. PubMed is one of the most important websites, most important search databases. This is the screenshot of the website of PubMed, which is free of charge in comparison, for instance, with Embase, which belongs to the Elsevier group. PubMed is frequently daily updated. PubMed belongs to the US government, has a daily update. There is a general update after at the end of the week, and includes links to the journal's websites. It's very easy and user-friendly. So let's try to perform an example using the PICO model. So we have a problem, patients or population, intervention, comparison, control, and outcome. This is a practical example for framing a research question using the PICO model for the search. The population here, the statistical population, is represented by patients with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is a tuberculosis form caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis strains, which are resistant in vitro to at least two of the most important and effective anti-tuberculosis drugs, that is isoniazid and rifampicin. But we can have more complicated drug-resistant patterns. In this specific case, we define those cases as XDR-TB, extensively drug-resistant TB, where we have a tuberculosis form caused by MDR, Mycobacterium tuberculosis strains, which are resistant to any fluoroquinolones and to at least one of the second-line injectable drugs, amikacin, kanamycin, or caprimycin. In this example, we wanted to evaluate the efficacy of linezolid containing regimens prescribed to MDR-TB patients after the evidence of the in vitro efficacy of linezolid against Mycobacterium tuberculosis strains. And we wanted to compare the efficacy of this intervention with a conventional background standardized regimen. So we have our control arm. The primary outcome is the culture conversion. So we want to assess if the proportion of culture conversion, the rate of culture conversion is higher in the arm of patients treated with linezolid containing regimen than in the arm of those treated with a linezolid sparing regimen. We then identify the keywords MDR-TB and linezolid, which can be combined using the Boolean operator AND the choice of AND depends by our choices of exclusion of manuscripts or papers dealing with, for instance, the use of linezolid for staphylococcal infections. You know that linezolid was approved at the beginning for patients with methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus infections. And on the other side, we want to exclude papers on MDR-TB, describing, for instance, the epidemiology of MDR-TB or studies on MDR-TB patients treated with other drugs than linezolid. So we want to increase using the Boolean operator and the specificity of our search. We can use the mesh for the identification of the more useful terms to be included in the search database. Mesh is a vocabulary of subject headings or subheadings, which can be found in PubMed, and they are updated every year. Using this tool, we could avoid problems of spelling and terminology. So here, where there is more resources, you can find the mesh database. And this is the page refer to linezolid. So here you can read headings and subheadings related to the antibiotic linezolid. Another important database is the Cochrane database of the Cochrane collaboration. It was created in honor of Elsie Cochrane, a British medical researcher who have a key role in the epidemiological field. The Cochrane library includes 6 databases, one for the systematic reviews, one for the reviews of effects, one for the clinical trials, one for the health technology assessment, the HTA, one for the economic evaluation, the health economic studies, and one for the methods. After the identification, after having framed questions for a review, the next step is the identification of the scientific evidence, the detection and the selection of the scientific evidence. The assessment, first of all, after the retrieval of the records, we should assess title and abstract. This is the first step. And the assessment of the titles and the abstracts of the record is based on the selection criteria, the inclusion and exclusion criteria that we have defined in the protocol. Inclusion and exclusion criteria are used by two independent researchers who evaluates the records for a first screening of the scientific evidence. This is a rapid screening, and if the records seem suitable for our research scope aim, the following step is characterized by the assessment of the full test for the final selection of the articles. The next step is represented by the data extraction, which is performed independently by two researchers to improve the reliability of the findings. In case of discrepancies, a third senior expert referee is invited to provide a final decision. What should we collect from the paper selected during this process? 4 bullets here for 4 main features. First of all, study characteristics. From the year or the years of the study when the study was carried out, the year of the publication of the article, the medical journal where the article was published, the sample size, the intervention or the exposures in case of an experimental or an observational study, and then the duration of the follow-up, if any. Second, the demographic variables, for instance, age and gender. Third, the characteristics of the sample, risk factors, concomitant therapies, comorbidities. And then the outcomes, mortality, occurrence of a disease, recurrences, relapses, etc. Third step in a systematic review, assessment of the quality of the studies. Two independent reviewers should evaluate, first of all, the internal validity of a study. Internal validity means the reliability of the association between an intervention or an exposure and a specific outcome. The authors should rate the quality of the scientific evidence using specific scales. We have different scales, JEDD, which is used for randomized controlled trials, Newcastle-Ottawa, which is used for observational studies, case control or cohort or longitudinal studies, Cochrane review form for the risk of bias, and another important scale is QUADAS-2 for the assessment of the quality of diagnostic accuracy studies. The fourth step in a systematic review is the summary of the scientific evidence. We pull variables of the single studies including the outcomes. And then we show summary outcomes or effects. The approach for the computation of the study findings is called meta-analysis. So here you can see in this picture the process. As I told you, in the systematic review is a sort of collection of pieces of puzzle, and then the systematic review combine all the puzzle in order to have a large picture of a specific topic. But at the end, we should provide an interpretation of the results. And the interpretation of the results should be based on the assessment of the risk of biases. One of the most important biases which can be found in a systematic review is the publication bias. So the publication bias should be evaluated. So we should perform the exploration for the heterogeneity, which should help determine whether the overall summary, the effect, can be trusted. What is a publication bias? We have here two different definitions. I prefer the second one. The publication bias is the tendency on the parts of the researchers, the reviewers, and the chief editors of the journals to submit, accept, and publish articles based on the direction or strength of the study findings. Other important biases are the time lag bias, more likely to be published rapidly, the language bias, published only in English, or the citation bias, more likely to be cited by others. The funnel plot is a graph which can be found in the systematic reviews. It is adopted by the authors to assess the publication bias. We have in the x-axis an odds ratio and the standard error, the variability in the y-axis. What is its meaning? When we have a symmetrical plot, the cycles are the individual studies we selected, there is a lack, an absence of a publication bias. Asymmetrical plots highlight the presence of a publication bias. When we want to summarize the scientific evidence, we have both a qualitative and, when feasible, a quantitative meta-analysis synthesis summary. Meta-analysis is based on the adoption of statistical techniques in a systematic review to combine, to pool, to merge the results of the selected studies. It is a quantitative approach for systematically combining the findings of previous research to arrive at conclusion about the main body of research. As we said before at the beginning of this presentation, a systematic review may not include a meta-analysis, but a meta-analysis should be based on a systematic review. So the meta-analysis is a component of a systematic review. We can find systematic reviews without any meta-analysis. This depends on the nature of the data we collected. The effect size, which is a value reflecting the strength of a relationship between two variables, is usually described by risk indicators such as odds ratio, risk ratios, relative risk, or sometimes means proportion. Its value depends on weights based on the amount of information carried out by each study. The effect size describes the value of the outcome variable, of the dependent variable. The precision of the estimated effect size depends mainly on the sample size. Studies with a large sample size can influence the precision of this estimation. The precision of the estimation of an effect size can be described by the standard error or, more frequently, by the 95% confidence interval. When we describe an effect size in a systematic review, we use indicators to describe the heterogeneity. There are different indicators, but the most frequently used is the I-square. The I-square describes the proportion, the percentage of variation across studies. Variation due to heterogeneity rather than chance. We can have different classes, different groups of heterogeneity. From 0 to 40%, the heterogeneity, the variation across studies due to heterogeneity might not be relevant. Between 30 to 60%, we can have moderate heterogeneity. From 50 to 90%, we can have a substantial heterogeneity. Usually from 75 to 100%, we have a considerable heterogeneity. When we want to compute the effect size, we can choose the statistical models. There are two statistical models used during a meta-analytic approach: fixed effects and random effects. Random effects is used when we estimate that the heterogeneity the percentage of variation across study due to heterogeneity is high, usually more than 50%. Otherwise, if we estimate a low heterogeneity, we can use the fixed effects, which provide a conservative computation. So all studies, all the selected studies, when we use the fixed effects model, share a common true effect. The observed variability reflects sampling error, chance, and study weights are assigned with the goal of minimizing this within study error. As I told you a few seconds ago, the basis of the use of the adoption of the fixed effects model is the estimation of a low heterogeneity. The random effects model, the true effect estimate for each study varies. We estimate a high, more than 50% heterogeneity, and these non-conservative computation provide larger confidence intervals. When we perform the meta-analysis, we can use the results of the studies. In the majority of the cases, you can find meta-analysis based on data retrieved, collected from published reports. The meta-analysis is based on aggregated data, proportions, means, medians, etc. But sometimes meta-analyses are based on individual patient data. So after the systematic review and the selection of the studies, we can send an email to the corresponding author of the studies, and we can ask to provide the individual patient data. So in this case, we have the information of the individual patients, and we can collect all the individual cases coming from the different cohorts. It is clear that in this specific case, the advantage is straightforward. We have all the cases. We don't have, in theory, missing data, because we provide a framework to the corresponding authors, asking them to fill in all the variables included in this framework. The systematic reviews, the article on the systematic reviews published in the Lancet in 2018 I sent you is an individual patient data meta-analysis. It is a systematic review where the group of the McGill University collected individual data from the all observational cohorts, which published studies on MDR-TB, on the treatment of MDR-TB cases. So IPD, individual patient data meta-analysis, is a systematic review and meta-analysis of individual participant data aimed to collect, check, and reanalyze individual level data, not aggregated data. we should involve, we should invite all studies addressing a particular research question. And this type of systematic review and meta-analysis is considered the gold standard approach to summarize the synthesis, the scientific evidence. When we read an article on a systematic review and meta-analysis, we can find the forest plots. The forest plots are graphs adopted to describe the effect size. So you can see here individual lines describing the studies selected by the authors, and you can see here in green the effect size, in this specific case a mean difference, and the length of the line describes the 95% confidence interval. So we have studies with a longer, a wider 95% confidence interval, and other studies, in this case, for instance, with a shorter 95% confidence interval. The size of the effect size depends on the sample size. These are the effect size, subgroup analysis, and the final effect size. When we wanted to assess a forest plot, we should first of all consider the effect size here in black, and then we have to assess the level of difference, that is the heterogeneity, among the different studies included in the meta-analysis. This is a specific output where we have 3 studies, the experimental arm, the control arm, the standardized mean difference, which is the effect size. The computation of the standardized mean difference depends on a fixed effects model. Then we have here the effect size after pooling these 3 studies, and the related 95% confidence interval. And here you can have the I-square indicator, the description of the heterogeneity. And here you can see the forest plot, where we have the distribution of the individual studies and of the pool effect size. Okay, this was my last slide. Thank you very much for your kindest attention. It is clear that it isn't easy to summarize all the technical features of a systematic reviews in a few minutes, but I hope that the elements provided could be helpful to assess the article I sent you, as well as the articles you are gonna read in the near future. Have you got any questions or comments on this topic? Is there anyone who had the chance to read or write better a systematic review? Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Sodju, for that informative lecture. Yeah. Yeah. So I've written, I mean, very small systematic literature, I mean, and meta-analysis, I mean, very small ones, but I'm very interested in systematic reviews, and I would like to do more. One of the problem which I have is that regarding I mean, I have three short questions, if you would allow me, three
Yes.
short questions. Yeah, one is, the problem which I face is with literature search. So I realize that my searches are not good enough, and later on I add on, studies to the the pool. So I have to redo some of the the data extraction again. So I was just wondering, is it a good idea to involve a literature search expert? Is that something which, I don't know, probably is that something which you would do? That is what my one question is. Related to that is, you mentioned about, there's a concept called hand searching of literature, right? So one article, you go to the end and you see the references and you see whether any of them are important, you add them onto that. Is there any way I can bypass that, or it is something which is done? So that is what my first question is. Secondly is about the diamond which you showed. I mean, the width of the diamond is the confidence interval, I understand. Is there any way by which, how can we conceptualize the height of the diamond? I cannot understand that, or the area of the diamond. That is my second question. And finally, there is some apps and some softwares like Covidence. They say that you can do better, quicker. Is it I have never used that. It's a paid version. So is it something which you would recommend?
Yeah, thank you so much for your 3, 4, 5 questions, at least. No, they are very welcome, because they are important questions and clarifications on the presentation I showed you a few minutes ago. The first point is the presence in the market of experts in the search. The response is yes. There are experts, there are librarians which are specialized in the search of the article. As you said, this is a critical phase because, I mean, if we do not prepare the correct strings and if we don't identify the correct keywords, there is the risk that we miss important evidence. I guess that our strings and then our search should be focused on a specific database, a search database, and we should modify a little bit our strings depending on the search database we are going to use. And I guess that when we prepare an observational study, when we write a protocol for a randomized controlled trial or an observational study, there is the discussion between all the researchers involved in this research, where you can discuss about the inclusion and exclusion criteria. When you want to prepare a systematic review, there should be this critical discussion. There should be the involvement of the researchers for the clear identification of the keywords which should be adopted by the authors for the search. So it isn't easy. I mean, not 5 minutes to the identification of the keywords. Based on the research questions, based on the primary and secondary objectives, we should think about the keywords and the combination of the keywords. The use of the operator is key because, as I told you, the use, for instance, of not can be critical. We can lose important scientific evidence. The use of different databases is key because using different databases, we can find articles which are not included in some search databases. For instance, in the majority of the cases, we use PubMed as well as Embase. Sometimes some articles are not included in PubMed, but they can be found only in Embase. So the combination of different databases is key. However, as you highlighted, one of the most important points is the assessment of the list of references of the articles we select. So sometimes the results of our search is not 100% sensitive and specific. And then the assessment of the list of references is key to retrieve important articles not mentioned in the list of the records retrieved from the search database. Then another question was about the size of the diamond. The size of the diamond depends on the sample size. And there is a relationship between the size of the square for the individual studies as well as for the diamond. So there is a sort of direct relationship between the pool sample size and the size of the diamond. And then there is the issue of the 95 confidence interval. The last question was related to the software. We have several software. One of the most frequently used is the RefMan of the Cochrane collaboration. It was specifically prepared for the meta-analysis, the systematic reviews and meta-analysis of randomized control trials, but it can be used also for observational studies. The main advantage of RefMan is that you can start, you can include in the database the entire process, starting from the systematic review to the meta-analysis. On the other side, you have other software like Stada, for instance, or Staff Direct, or meta-analysis, which are software for the computation. Wonderful baby. And when we use RefMan, we have in a single file all the steps of our systematic review, including the meta-analysis. And this is key because here we have the transparency of the process. We can send, for instance, to the journal, to the editor, the entire file, including the steps of our process, of our systematic review. And there is the possibility with another software named Grade Pro of the Grade, which is useful for the recommendations. It is used when we want to prepare recommendations for the clinical guidelines, which have the recognition with the RefMan. So we can include, thanks to this software, the recommendation which is based on the process of the systematic review.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Other comments or questions?
I have one question. Thank you very much for your outstanding presentation and for all these excellent explanations for us. I just have one doubt I want to ask about that if we just decide to perform our own systematic review, what you would recommend? What would be the optimal number of sources to, to put in the list, minimum and maximum?
You mean databases?
Yeah.
At least two, at least. And I would recommend at least PubMed, because it's the best source of scientific evidence we have. Then, as I told you, the main advantage is represented by it is free of charge. And base, I mean, it depends on your university, on your company, but it isn't free of charge. So my suggestion is at least 2. Sometimes, for instance, during this period, during this COVID-19 era, when I review or I manage as editor of journals COVID-19 papers from Chinese colleagues, there were systematic review based on Chinese databases. In the majority of the cases, I usually reject those systematic reviews, because one of the main important points related to the systematic review is the transparency and the reproducibility. So the findings should be reproducible. You should, as a reader, replicate those findings. But if I cannot manage databases, Chinese databases, and mainly I cannot understand that language, it is difficult to replicate. And so I guess that my recommendation is the use of 2 search databases, international databases, to retrieve the international scientific evidence.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And you also said that it's very crucial for us to assess the paper's article by just abstract, yes, to know if we have to include it or no. How do you normally work so fast by this? I'm sure you don't waste so much time. You can just look and decide.
Yeah, I mean, the systematic review is usually a long process. The mean of the duration of systematic review should be, in theory, this is the scientific evidence, 6 months, 1 year. But it depends on the topic, because if the topic is novel and we don't have enough scientific evidence, so the systematic review is easy. But for instance, the preparation of the protocol is a long process. And then, when we assess, when we screen titles and abstract, I guess it's easy. If we are focused on tuberculosis and the record has a title on, for instance, lupus erythematosus systemicus, okay, it's easy. There should be a mistake in the list of records of that database. Otherwise, reading the abstract, you can easily understand. I mean, you have your selection criteria on your right side. You can understand, you know where you want to get to, and it's easy.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Other question or comments?
Yes, I also have one question.
Yes.
Dear Professor Soju, thank you very much
Yes,
for this very deep and useful presentation. It's not very clear for me how we can evaluate individual patients' data from decades of different sites, because some biomarkers, some data can be gained from different research methods, and we should use some instrument to make them equal. Yes, how can you do it? Which method do you use for this?
Your choice depends on the selection criteria you want to use for your systematic review. When you say selection criteria, you are going to select. And in the exclusion criteria, you should include in the exclusion criteria all the elements aimed at discriminating the homogeneous evidence. I mean, based on your knowledge, you can choose to, for instance, select only the experimental studies, the randomized control studies, and not the observational studies. When I started my my studies on linezolid and multi-drug resistant tuberculosis in 2009, there was only observational evidence. And then after a few years, the first study published in New England Journal of Medicine on the first randomized control trial on linezolid in prescribed to MDR-TB patient. And in that specific case, we have observational and experimental study, but the internal validity of the randomized control trial is high, and the observational and the internal validity of the observational study is low. So if I want to perform a good systematic review, a good meta-analysis, here I can discriminate between high and low quality studies, and then I can decide to exclude observational studies, which cannot, I mean, cannot be merged, put with the experimental studies. So at the end, the quality of the results depends on the methods you have chosen for that systematic review. But it depends on the research question, because the identification of suitable selection criteria depends on your research question. If you prepare a focused research question, it is easy to have clear, straightforward selection criteria for identification of the perfect study for your research question.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Other questions or comments? Okay, so in Italy, in my city, Sassari, in Sardinia, it's 1:15 p.m. So lunchtime. Then at 2 p.m., I guess, Central Europe time, there should be I guess should be 2 or 2:30. Dr. Colombo?
It should be 2, but I don't know, Professor. You can take your time for the presentation preparation.
They can work without my support, and then I guess at 3:45 we can 4:45 we can begin our discussion and assess what they did during the period given for the assessment of the article.
Okay, I will resend just to be sure the article to all the participants by email right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Please use the Prisma checklist, the 27 items I described during my presentation to assess this article. Keep into consideration that I'm one of the co-authors of that paper, so the quality is high. I'm kidding.
We're meeting at 3 p.m. Central European time. What time are we meeting again?
4.
4.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And if you have further questions, we can discuss later. Okay.
Thank you. And
One moment. Do we have to prepare a presentation, right?
Yes,
Or-
a PPT file, as you did,
Okay.
I guess, with Stefano Aliberti during the first.
But we prepared one from the all. We prepared one from all.
Depends on you.
From the-
What did you do 2 days ago?
Okay.
We prepared one presentation. We all discussed together, and someone was presenting. Animash was presenting from all our.
The same methods adopted a few days ago.
Can be done also today. Mhm.
Good. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, just Olga, Sanila, and Yulia. So we need to decide who's going to present then. I mean, one of you guys can present. Antonia as well. I mean,
Animesh, do you want to present again?
Yeah,
You were really
you were good. You were good, Animash.
I mean, I can try, but I just hope that it's fine. So
We discuss it together.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can discuss together, and then you can add the previous time.
right. So can we meet at say 3 p.m.
Yes.
Yes.
Central European time?
Yeah,
3
would be nice.
3 p.m. Yeah. Okay.
About 3 p.m. according to Central European time. Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Yulia, it's not our time, right?
Yeah, it's not.
It's 4. It's
Yeah,
4
4.
in Ukraine.
Then
Yeah.
you-
Okay.
How many hours later are we meeting? So we are meeting after 2 hours 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So
2
so we are-
hours 15 minutes. Yeah.
We are meeting
probably we can meet after 2 hours 30 minutes.
hour 40 minutes, right? At 3, right?
40 approximately. Yeah, Antonia is right.
Hour 45, 44 minutes. Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, 1 hour 40 minutes approximately.
1 hour 40 minutes.
Yes.
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 Yeah. It's 1 hour 40 minutes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we'll meet at that.
Okay, see you soon, guys.
Yeah.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. Actually,
Hello, Animesh.
yeah. Can you
Hello.
hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
So I'm sorry. I mean, I got late. I started late and I could not finish it. So I was just working on this. So if it is okay, then can we start discussing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I can. I think we can finish it together.
Yeah, that we could. Okay, so the first thing was they identify the report as a systematic review meta-analysis of both.
Yes.
So
Yes.
they've done that, right? They've done that. Yeah. So I've written why provides a structured summary finding as applicable background objective data. So they are talking about the summary, sorry, a structured summary, including background objectives, data sources, study eligibility criteria, participants, interventions, study appraisal, synthesis methods, results, limitation, conclusions, and implications of key findings, systematic review, registration number. So I think, yeah, they have done everything, but I don't think they've given a registration number, have they?
I didn't find the registration
I
number.
also did not find. I could not find.
Okay, so right. So should we put a yes and question mark? Put that.
Yes.
Would that do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we are not sure about the registration number. Okay. So I'll just add. I'm sorry. Okay. So the next one, describe the rationale for the review in the context. So in the introduction, have they talked about the rationale? So they have done that, right? They have done that.
Is that
So in the introduction part, in the introduction part, they mentioned that, in the MDR tuberculosis treatment is very difficult and some new drugs have come and they wanted to check that, right? So would you want me to put it as yes?
Yes.
Yeah, I also think that it could be as yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Okay, next, in the last paragraph of the introduction, they have mentioned about the objectives. Provide an explicit statement of questions being addressed with reference to PICOS, participant intervention, comparison, outcomes, and study design. So
Sorry for coming late.
Hello.
I'm
hello,
sorry for
Antonia.
joining late.
So
Okay.
no, we just joined. So we were just, we were just, trying to fill up this form, right? Prisma checklist. We have just moved up till the rationale. We are discussing the rationale part of introduction. So second last point, right?
Okay.
We were just discussing. Yeah. So we're just discussing. Yeah. So we're just discussing the rationale they had done. We were just discussing, sorry, the last part, objective, where they have mentioned the type of studies or not. So, so first line of the last paragraph, they have mentioned the past decade, several experimental and observation studies have documented the use of new and repurposed drugs. Achha, so in the last line, they say we assembled a database of individual records of patients, but they have not mentioned from what kind of studies they are. But probably it is intuitive that it would be these experimental and observational studies. Would you agree with that? Did I confuse you?
Yes,
No. I still try to. Okay, go on.
Oh, yeah. So would this be a?
As for me,
Yeah,
it's
please
no.
tell me.
How do you think? Yes or no? The force.
Yeah. So I feel. So they have not mentioned categorically. They have taken from individual patient database from experimental and observational studies. So they have not mentioned that. So probably we can put a no here then.
No,
right?
I would like to put no.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great. So we'll just move on to the next thing then. Right. Just 1 second. Just copy this over here. Sorry. Okay. So I'll just put an insert text box here. Okay. Right. Just 1 second. Yeah, sorry. So in the methods, whether they have talked about protocol and registration, indicate if a review protocol exists. So they have said that the protocol for this study followed PRISMA guidelines and is available from the authors. But here they have also mentioned and where it can be accessed. Example, web address, and if available, provide registration number. So this is not there, right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, I have it, but how do people get it? I mean, if I'm the author, I have it, but how do people access it, right? So if they cannot access it readily, I think that's a limitation of the study, right? So I think it should be a no. Would you agree?
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. They should upload it in Prospero, for example, right?
Yeah, they should do it in Prospero, Antonio. Yeah, so eligibility criteria. So specific study characteristics, PICO's length of follow-up and report characteristics. Example, years considered, language, publication status used as criteria for eligibility, giving rationale. Okay.
It was present.
So it was present, but have they also mentioned about study? The language. I could not find that.
No,
English.
without language.
Not language. So have they mentioned about years considered? They have said 2009 and 2000, right? And they have done it in 2016. Yeah, 15. So they have done it till April 2016, right? So the initial study they did between 2009 and 15, and they updated the search in April 2016, right? In the method section, I'm reading the second paragraph.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So they have done that.
Yes,
so
then.
It's yes, but we were just discussing whether the language part, they have not mentioned that, whether they have included all other studies. I mean, I don't know, German, Spanish, right?
It's a bias.
Yeah, so I think it should be then, it should be publication status. So they have not, so I think then we should then put it as no. Is it fine?
Yes. No.
Yeah. No.
Yes.
Okay. No. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not complete no and not complete yes.
Partially.
Yeah. So we'll just put it as no, and we'll just grab his attention, and then when he asks why, then we'll just we see that probably it's it's a mixed thing. Some yes, most yes, but some no. Right? Okay.
Right.
Information sources. Describe all information sources. Example, databases with dates of coverage. Contact with study authors to identify additional studies in the search and date last searched. Okay. So they have talked about that, right?
Yes, it was present. It's okay.
So they have the third paragraph, methods. We invited investigators of potentially eligible studies and investigators who participate in an earlier meta-analysis of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis to contribute individual level patient data, right? So they have
Yes.
done that. Okay. Okay. So we would put this as yes.
Yes.
Yes. It will be yes.
Okay, great. Great. So search, present full electronic search strategy for at least one database, including any limits used such that it could be repeated. So here they have mentioned a appendix number, I
No,
think.
it was, yes, it was.
Mhm.
I didn't
Um,
see it.
Please.
no, into method, just 1 second. Okay, so in the method second paragraph, I think sixth line, using the same search terms in Medline, Embase and Cochrane library, appendix page 2, they have mentioned. So I think there they must have mentioned the search strategy. I personally could not go through that, but I'm guessing they would have, or probably last week and just look this up whether,
Yeah. Just put yes
this was the
first.
case. Okay, yeah, we'll just put. Okay, study selection, state the process for selecting studies. Example, screening, eligibility, including systematic review, and if applicable, including the meta-analysis. Okay, okay. So,
Yes, it
so
was.
they want to.
They did it.
Yes, no, they have done that.
Yes.
They did it.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So did they also mention that which studies went into the systematic review and which studies went into the meta-analysis? I could not get that because systematic review is a qualitative review. There we just get this study has said this, and then when we do a meta-analysis we get a quantitative value, right? We get a systematic review has larger number of studies. Out of that we select
For
fewer
meta.
studies, yeah, for meta-analysis. So have they done that? I could not find that
Sure,
whether
they did it.
they did it.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
sorry.
not sure.
Okay, yeah. So I was just okay. So I think okay. So I think I don't know. So many no's I think is not good. But okay, we'll just put a. I don't know. We'll just put a. We'll just put a no here and we'll just see. ठीक है ना? अच्छा, data collection process. Describe method of data extraction from reports. Example, piloted forms, independently in duplicate. Have they done anything like that? And any processes of obtaining and confirming data from investigators. That they have
Yeah.
done. They have said
They
there's
did
a
it.
format.
Confirmed.
Yes, they did it. And they
Yeah.
have done that. They have, in their format, they have
Yeah.
entered the data and yet they have sent it back to the authors and they have confirmed that, this was it.
Yes.
So I think they have done that. Right. So
They
I'll
did
just
put yes then.
right. Okay. Data items, list and define all variables for which data were sought. Have they done that? In the methods section, have they mentioned that they have mentioned about, relapse?
I can't find it. Can't find.
Yeah, I could not. Sorry, I could not find it. Just could you find it? Sorry.
No, I didn't find.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So okay, listen on variables from for which data was sought. So what do you think, Olga, Antonia? Could be is there a? I don't think there is a. They have not mentioned that these are the parameters for which data were. So in the data analysis they have mentioned first line, we assessed end of treatment success compared with failure, relapse, and death from any cause compared with success or failure, relapse. But and here in the data in the method section, second last paragraph, investigators provided the following de-identified information, that is AIDS, sex, HIV infection, antiretroviral therapy, previous treatment. Okay, but and outcomes. And outcomes, and they have also mentioned outcomes, defined end of treatment outcomes, relapse and sputum culture conversion.
Dzień dobry. Dzień dobry. They
Hello, yeah, please. Hello, Antonia, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Antonia, switch
Oh
on
my
your
God.
microphone.
sorry, sorry.
It's fine.
I didn't realize. So here in 823, the investigators provided the following information for all patient clinical information, diagnostic information, blah blah blah. So it's the variable that where the data were sought.
Okay, so you feel it's a yes, right?
Yes, and
It's
I
a
think for
yes.
meta-analysis they also make it quite detailed here for the meta-analysis, but it will be later. Just
Okay,
pass it.
fine. Risk of bias in individual studies. Describe methods used for assessing the risk of bias of individual studies,
Yeah,
and how this information. So they've done that. They have used the Robbins one, Robbins I. Right? Sorry. So this should be a yes as well. Okay, this is a yes. State the principal summary measures. Example. Okay. So, sorry. State the principal summary measures. Summary measures: risk ratio, difference in means. So in the method section.
They did.
They did. Where is it?
This is in the data analysis. Wait, I read it. It was in page.
So it has
from
to be in
page 823 until 824.
Okay.
They explain how they analyze the data.
But tell me something. They have sent this has to be there in the methods section. So ideally, data analysis should be a part of the methods section, right? So, so
Yeah.
even if it should be. So have they mentioned? So like so if it is death or something, they have to mention whether they have reported in odds ratio. So could you find anywhere they have mentioned that? I mean.
Say use
Okay.
random effect to estimate adjusted odds ratios or
Yes.
death during treatment.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Right. So this is a yes then, right? This
Yes.
is a yes.
And risk differences also they said it.
Right. So we'll just put this as yes. Okay. Synthesis of results. Describe the methods of handling data and combining results of studies they've done, including measures of consistency.
Yes, they did
Okay.
in the same paragraph.
They did. Okay. Just 1 second. Here data analysis first paragraph, right? Second last line, they have said we did not combine the outcomes of death and failure or relapse because these cannot be considered as equivalent, right? They've mentioned this, but what I was looking at in the table, they have actually combined this, have they not? In the table, say table.
What exactly?
Table 2. Table 2, yeah. Success versus failure or relapse, died versus success, failure or relapse. So is it not something is there? But I think it does not apply for this question. Probably, we can just say this as yes. Okay, fine. Next is the risk of bias across studies. Okay. Specify any assessment risk bias that may affect the cumulative. Example, publication bias, selective reporting within studies. Have they done that? Publication bias? I don't think they've done that.
Publication bias.
There was something. This one.
Fun plot. I don't think they have done that.
I am not sure that they did it.
Haven't done it.
Done? Done?
No, they haven't. Have not.
They have not. I think. Okay, so I just am searching bias, and but nowhere they have mentioned publication bias. So we'll just put this as no then. Okay. Addition analysis. Describe methods of addition analysis, sensitivity, subgroup analysis, meta regression. So they have talked about that, right? Sensitivity, and they have done
Yeah,
sensitivity
they did
analysis,
subgroup analysis
propensity score.
also.
Yeah. Okay, so this would be a yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Okay, great. Oh, we have got one more. We have time for that, 19 minutes. Results. Study selection. Give numbers of studies screened, assess for eligibility, including the review with reasons for exclusions at each stage, ideally with a flow diagram. So that they have done, right?
Yes.
Yes.
But have they given reason for exclusion? For example, in the figure study selection on page 824, right?
They give reason, yeah.
They have given reason for inclusion. Okay.
And
But suppose,
exclusion
you know,
as well. Yeah.
oh,
For
okay,
example,
okay, they have got done. They have done.
refuse.
Oh, okay, they have done that.
No auto response, investigator
They're done.
reviews, blah blah blah.
Yeah, they have done that. They have done. Okay, I'm sorry. So this would be a yes. Just sorry. This would be a yes. Yes. Okay. Study characteristics. For each study, present characteristic for which data were extracted. Example: study size, PCOS, follow-up period, and provide the citations. Have they done that in the appendix? Because inside this they have not done.
For each study, present characteristic for which.
So in the systematic review, ideally they should describe each study. By which author, which date, how many subjects were there. So if a reader who is reading it, they can just read that table and they can have an idea about each subject, each study. Sorry. So I don't think they have done that here, but they must have done it in the appendix because it's routine stuff. I'm sure. But we'll just see the appendix after this quickly, right?
Yeah. So maybe just question mark. If we have time, we will see the appendix.
Sure, we can do that. So you want me to put a question mark, or I'll just put a question mark here?
Because we are not, we haven't seen the appendix, right?
Yeah, we have not, but we have to do that. Okay.
Or I can see the appendix for you. Okay.
Sure. That would be really helpful. So 1 second. So and done that. So you want me to put a question mark here? Okay. Risk of bias within studies. Present data on risk of bias of each study and available any outcome level assessment. See item 12. Achha, so they have talked about risk of bias in the method section. And in the results section, they should be telling us that, these studies were, have they done that?
Let's see.
So if they have said that in the method section, they must have done that in the results section. Otherwise, I mean, it would not be right. So okay, so they have done that. So results, for results first paragraph. So page 824, fifth line, sixth line, last line, fifth, sixth, last line from the below, right? Quality was judged as being high in 39 studies, moderate in 9 studies, and low in 2 studies. Characteristic of the patients included in the meta-analysis was similar to those of patients within studies that had been originally identified as being potentially eligible, but who are not included. So quality assessment they have done. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Risk of bias is quality assessment. And okay, so for all outcomes considered, benefits on present for each study, simple summary data for each intervention group, effect estimates and confidence intervals, ideally with a forest plot. So for each study they have not done that. for each study, right? So ideally, you know, it should be, I'm saying, you know, once Ray et al, this is the, you know, this is the summary estimate. I don't know, for Suska et al, for Olga, for everybody, you know, for each author, there should be one kind of summary estimate. So that is not there, but I'm sure, but I probably. So what do you say? I mean, Sanila, what do you say?
For me, they didn't. They haven't done it for every outcomes, as,
Yeah,
as I understand.
for all outcomes. So it's not there. So probably I think we would have to just we'll ask him, and or we will just we'll just see it in the appendix also. Synthesis of results, present results of each meta-analysis done, confidence intervals and measures of consistency.
For each.
Have they done that? For including confidence measures of, so they have confidence interval, etc. They have mentioned. For example, in, you know, table 5, they have talked about the adjusted odds ratio, and they have given a 95% confidence interval, 95% CI, right? We can see a column there. So that they have done. Even for table 4, they have given an adjusted odds ratio or an adjusted risk difference. So I think they have done that. Measures of consistency, I'm not sure what it means. Measures of consistency. I don't know. Anybody has an idea what this is? I'm not sure. So we'll just we'll just put it as I mean, question mark and yes, and we'll just ask him if I'm not sure whether this is the case. Okay. Risk of bias across studies. Present results of any assessment across. Oh God. Cross studies. So they have talked about in you know, I'll just see 15 specify. Okay. So this, they're talking about publication bias, selective. So okay, so this was in the methods section, and if they have done that in the results section, right? So since we could not find anything about publication bias, then we should then, you know, make it no. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. I agree with you.
Okay.
But they assess the potential selection bias, right?
Yeah.
They assess potential selection bias. Yeah, they have done that.
They didn't. Sorry, I cannot access the appendix because it needs any subscription or something like that. Is anyone have any subscription to Lancet?
Do you guys have Sci-Hub in your country?
No.
No?
Oh, sharehub.tv. No, what is the domain that you use?
Sci-Hub, Sci-Hub dot. You guys don't have Sci-Hub? How come?
Yeah, I know. This is the pirates.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I suppose everyone knows it.
Sci-Hub dot. This one.
What,
Can you see my screen? Sci-Hub.se.
No.
.se. Okay, I'll do it. Cool. Okay, what is the? I'll find it there then.
Okay, please. Additional analysis, give results of additional analysis if done. Example, sensitivity of subgroup analysis. So this they have done, right?
Yes, they have done.
Okay, so we'll just put yes here. Okay, discussion. Summary of evidence, summarize the main findings, including the strength of evidence for each main outcome, consider the relevance to key groups. So discussion, I think they have done that. They've summarized what they want. Limitations also they have discussed. Limitations they have talked about, you know, that it was an observation study. You know, in page 831, they have talked about this limitations. Okay, so discussion second paragraph. Despite the large number of patients, this study had weaknesses particularly the observational design and individualized treatment policies in most studies, right?
Right. Correct.
Right. So I'll just put this as yes. I'll also put this as yes again. Provide a general interpretation of the results in the context of other evidence.
Yes, it was.
Yes, they did it.
Yes, sir, yeah, they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In Shahab is without the appendix.
Yes, without the appendix. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I'll just I'll just try to locate it after that. And last, I think funding they have mentioned. You know, it is funded by.
They did by something of Canada.
By yes, American Thoracic Society.
Yeah. Yeah. They've done that. So this is yes. Okay. So I'll just save this once. Okay. And just try to see whether. So access. Search the sources, journals. Lancet. Is it in? It's in Lancet, right? Or Lancet Respiratory Diseases. I think it's in Lancet.
This
Lancet,
is
2018.
Lancet. Yeah, Lancet.
No results were found. How can that be? Lancet.
And where are you looking for this appendix?
I'm going to my institute site, and they have you know, login access to this. I think I'll just try to see whether I can just, you know, locate it there. Minutes. So we have use search, sign in. The sources, journals. Sorry. So Lancet. Next. Next. Sorry, HIGKL. Next. Lancet. We don't have Lancet. Oh, no. We don't. I'm sorry, we don't have Lancet. How can that be? Okay, so I'll just 1 second. I'll just try to see whether Lancet. Treatment correlates, purchase, subscribe. Where have they talked about linked articles? No. Okay, summary. Check for updates. Article info. Linked articles. Not located, I'm sorry. Purchase. Summary, references. Where am I supposed to get it? Is there a link to the Antonia? Could you locate a link to the appendix?
In the article, if you just search appendix, and there will be like online near the appendix words. There will be like online that we can click.
Achha, there is something there. 1 second. Appendix, but I cannot find it here.
Appendix. Wait. Next. In page 827 on the right and the lowest sentence, see online for appendix, and this online you should be able. Oh no, it cannot be clicked.
It cannot be clicked, no?
Or maybe we should go online then to the website.
Okay, so we have 4 minutes left. I don't think we'll be able to access the appendix. I think we'll have to just linked articles, rated clinics article summary.
Online cannot be.
Excuse me, if you want to have some more minutes, I can write to Professor Soju and see if it's feasible for him.
Okay, and can you please send us the appendix for this paper?
I will ask to Professor Soju, yes.
Okay,
I don't have the appendix right now, so I have to ask him.
Okay, because we have difficulty in accessing the appendix.
Okay, I will ask for more 20 minutes and then I ask for the appendix as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
But I guess if you will not have appendix, we can start now. We don't need more 20 minutes, yes?
Yeah. I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. I think 20 minutes. I mean, it's already 8:30 here.
What time is it there?
8:30. Antonia, it must be. Oh, you're in Poland now, so it must be. Antonia is from Indonesia, right? And she is in Poland. We met last time. We went to Prague, right?
We met first time there.
Great. Sanila, where are you from? Ukraine?
Ukraine, yes.
I missed the introduction first day. You're working as a?
It's internal medicine doctor, PhD student now. Yes, I also
in Ukraine, Xenia?
Ukraine, yes, Ukraine.
Okay.
And at the east of Ukraine.
Yulia,
are you also
Kyiv, right? The capital of
Kyiv,
Ukraine?
it's the capital of Ukraine, but I'm from Dnipro. It's the eastern part of Ukraine. Yulia, are you from eastern part?
I am from Ivano-Frankivsk, western part.
From western.
Yeah.
And
Yulia, Yulia is also from Ukraine.
Yes.
Okay,
and Olga
is
also?
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why this congress is so popular. Ukraine.
Okay.
And 2 years ago, I was the one from Ukraine, but next year, previous year, a lot of Ukrainian doctors were present at this congress, and now also.
And Fatima, where are you from? Oh, maybe she's not there.
Antonia, you were a rising star previous year, yes, on Prague.
Yeah, and also Animes.
Yeah, and Animesh also. I remember Animesh also.
Yeah.
I mean, last time I'd risen, and this time I'd set, kind of. Sun, risen, set.
It's true.
Nice.
So how's the corona thing in there, Ukraine? Is it bad?
It's not so good.
Is it?
Have you got the vaccine
Lots
yet?
of cases?
No, we haven't got.
They're waiting.
You're waiting, okay. So we are getting the vaccines from tomorrow, but I mean, we don't know about, to be honest, that so we are getting a a made in India vaccine. So I mean, So we are waiting for the vaccine.
You're not sure, right? You're not sure that you want to be
Please.
vaccinated?
So everybody's kind of worried about vaccines, right? Side effects.
What is the
this and that.
efficacy of your Indian vaccine?
It's a very tough question because the phase 3 data is still not out, right? So it's still not out. So, but it is thought to be the same range as probably the Oxford vaccine. You heard about the Oxford vaccine? AstraZeneca has got on 63% efficacy. So we are getting both that Oxford vaccine or the Made in India vaccine, but we cannot choose. The government will decide that which vaccine you get. So
we are waiting for that.
Which vaccines?
Sorry,
Which vaccines are you getting? Which vaccines are you getting, Antonia? You have already been vaccinated.
In Poland, we use Pfizer and Moderna. And what about Ukraine? What do you get there?
We are still waiting what they will propose.
So it's not yet decided.
We don't have so much, choice.
As I know, our government have bought Chinese
Sinovac, probably.
Yes, we are talking about Chinese.
Sinovac.
But maybe
they will start in February, right?
February, yes.
Yeah,
And,
but maybe also we can buy some in private laboratories, I guess, another one, they say.
Really?
But I don't know how it goes.
Here, the vaccination is started already. We got the healthcare workers already got vaccinated.
Julia, you're also an internal medicine doctor?
Yes, I'm internal medicine doctor, but after maternity leave, I came back to university working at university, not as a doctor now, because I'm also a PhD resident. I want to finish with it and after.
And Olga?
As well, internal medicine doctor and PhD student, internal medicine department.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Sorry, we were talking about something else.
Okay.
About COVID, like.
You can continue if you want.
No. Thank you.
Secrets? Professional secrets?
No. We were just discussing about our respective lives and how COVID has been and how excited we are about the vaccine in general.
Okay, but we didn't perform this morning an ice-breaking session to better understand your background. There was a brief presentation 2 days ago, but I would like to understand if there is someone working on TB, being the article focus on MDR-TB. Probably people from Eastern Europe.
Yes, there are a lot of TB in Ukraine, a lot of. But we don't work. I don't work by myself.
You have an high incidence of TB HIV co-infection.
Yes, very high incidence.
Yes.
I went to Ukraine a few years ago.
Really?
For the World Health Organization as a consultant, and for some educational activities to the local for the local physicians, and I'm in Kiev, and there I had the chance to meet colleagues who were clever, and they have to manage a lot of cases with TB HIV co-infection, increasing trends during the last years.
Did you enjoy Ukraine?
Yes, a lot.
And Ukrainian food?
Have you tried borscht?
Is it a soup?
Yeah.
Is it bars, the red soup?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Red soup. Very popular in Ukraine.
Okay.
I'm working in TB, and I actually followed some of your lecture or seminars in ERS conference and others.
Great. Have you got the chance to attend the ERS conference in Madrid?
No, no, I didn't have chance.
Okay, because
I did.
during
I was there.
you were there.
Yeah.
Okay, because the last day of the conference, I delivered a lecture on the new guidelines, and I described some of the findings of the article I sent you on the scientific guidelines.
So I missed it because it's a very big conference, and it was my first TRS, and I was kind of confused what happens, and I have read this article before once, and two of the authors I see, they are Indians. They are actually they are the authors, and they are I know them kind of in person. So Dr. Behra, Digambar Behra, and Dr. Rupak Singla. So I think they are authors also in this thing.
This is a large group of physicians, and we published several papers collating all the cores. This is one of the most important. In the past, we published another systematic review individual patient data meta-analysis in PLOS Medicine, and it was the basis of the previous guidelines for the management of multi-drug resistant TB. Several studies were conducted on this topic, and it was very complicated to prepare the guidelines, because the collection of the data from the different cohorts was not easy. And sometimes there are problems in the collection of some variables. There are different standards of care, and they can affect the reliability of the findings. So it was a little bit difficult to collect all the information from all the centers all worldwide. But at the end, we prepared a good data set, and we carried out good analysis. And at the end, I guess that the final outcome of this process was the publication of the guidelines, which were supported by the American Thoracic Society, the European Respiratory Society, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention of the United States of America in Atlanta, and the Infectious Disease Society of America. Okay, so unfortunately, I received the message from Dr. Colombo, Professor Effler, and Professor Aliberti are not available. So after the discussion of the article, we can conclude everything. And there will be, I guess, a survey to discuss about your experience. Is it correct, Dr. Colombo?
Yes, Professor Soggiu. We will send to the participants a survey, and then we will organize a brief conference call later on, maybe in a month, just to collect your feedbacks and see if something of this experience could be helpful, in your job and career.
A sort of customer care satisfaction.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Colombo. Who is the presenter?
Animesh.
Yeah, so
I'll
be presenting.
Animesh.
Yeah, I'll be presenting, but it was a team effort, and everybody had chipped in. And if I get stuck, I hope the others would help me out. So this is the PRISMA checklist. Yeah. So first was the title: identify the report as a systematic review, meta-analysis, or both. So here, though we gave it a yes, I mean, we thought that it was pretty understood, but here the title did not categorically mention it's a systematic review. But just as you had mentioned in your lecture that every meta-analysis should be a part of systematic review, we thought that is very intuitive, that you know, a systematic review had been done.
Okay. Unfortunately, sometimes it depends on the editorial rules. We should delete some words. I mean, it depends on the number of words requested by the editorial rules of that journal. And in this case, initially we included the lines systematic review and meta-analysis, but they decided to delete them for a matter of space. No sufficient room.
Fine. So regarding the abstract, structured summary, provide a structured summary finding as applicable background objectives, data sources, study eligibility, participant intervention, study appraisal and synthesis methods, results, limitation, conclusions, implication of key findings, systematic review, registration number. We could find all of them except the registration number. We thought that probably this was not registered in Prospero, or in any other registration website, right? So we just put a question mark. Was it? So I don't think it was registered, right? So regarding the introduction, rationale, describe the rationale for review. This was definitely a yes. Objectives, provide an explicit
one question about this point, because I guess that probably you discussed this point with Stefano Alberti. I mean, the preparation of an article. The most important thing is the rationale, but there should be an outline. I mean, the elements of the background should have a link between them. We should start from a large perspective to a smaller one where we focus our attention. So if you read the most important journals from the New England Journal of Medicine to the Lancet, you can read, I mean, only a few sentences, only a few lines in the introduction, but not because the articles are poor, but because it is important to highlight only a few points, and then you have the aim of the study. But between the different lines, there is a link. So, for instance, if I wanted to write a study on the efficacy of the linezolid in a patient with MDR-TB, I start from describing the epidemiological burden of MDR-TB worldwide. The incidence of MDR-TB, tuberculosis is an important clinical and public health issue. Why? TUM, second line, more than 600,000 cases are estimated every year worldwide. Okay, so it's a public health issue. Why? The incidence of the disease is so high. We do not have effective therapeutic options. Okay, it was found that linezolid could be effective, efficacious in cultures of mycobacterial strains. Then, aim of this study is to assess the efficacy of linezolid containing regimen in patients with a diagnosis of MDR-TB. So you can see here, we started from this generic statement, tuberculosis is a clinical and public health issue. Then we focus on MDR-TB, on the epidemiological burden. Then the few therapeutic options available for the clinician worldwide. The preliminary data of the efficacy of the linezolid in vitro, and then the aim of this study. So you can see the relationship, okay, the link.
Right, right. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So Professor Aliberti mentioned to us about the the IMRAD format, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So in introduction for observational studies, at least, and he said that in introduction there should be a background, and the last paragraph should be about rationale, before we move on to the method. So I think the similar kind of protocol has to be followed for systematic review as well, right? Would that be okay? Right. So, so introduction objectives. Objectives provide an explicit statement of questions being addressed with reference to participants, interventions, comparisons, outcomes, and study design. This was done, but we thought that the last part, that is a study design, this was not explicitly mentioned in the last paragraph where objectives have been mentioned about. So the first line, it said that in the past decade, several experimental and observational studies have documented the use of these drugs. And then they have said, then it was said in the article, we assembled a database of individual record of patients treated for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. But they have not categorically mentioned that whether it's only observational studies or experimental studies or both.
But the study design is referred mainly to the systematic review.
Okay. Okay. So
not the study design of the selected studies, but the study design, it refers if it is clear that the authors are going to describe the results of a systematic review.
Okay, so we thought that because S means that it's about the individual studies. What are the study design of the individual studies? But so have they done that in this article?
I mean, we call there should be here in the methods because in the last line of the introduction. We assemble a database of individual records of patients treated for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. In the past decade, several experimental observational studies have documented the use of new and repurposed drugs. So, assembled here highlight the study design of the combination of the databases of different cohorts follow up worldwide.
Okay, all right.
Good. Excellent.
Okay, fine. So next is just 1 second. So within results, so I think we talked about. Sorry. Yeah. So we talked about within methods. Sorry. So methods, protocol, and registration indicate if a review protocol exists and if and where it can be accessed. So here we felt that the authors had written that the protocol for this study followed PRISMA guidelines and is available from the authors. So obviously a protocol existed, but we thought that it did not fulfill this criteria if and where it can be accessed, example web address, and provide a registration number. So we thought that probably it is not very easily accessible.
It was published probably after the publication of this article.
Okay. So we were not aware of that. Okay, fine. So eligibility criteria specify study characteristics, example PCOS, length of follow-up, and report characteristics, and example years considered, language, publication status used as criteria for eligibility, giving rationale. So here we thought that we would look up the appendix, but the appendix was not within us. We were confused whether only English language studies were included or other language studies were included. We felt that wasn't very only English. So we were not sure from the from this particular article, so we noted it as a no. Okay. Information sources describe all information sources, databases in the search and date last searched. So this was clearly mentioned that between 2009 and 2015 they had done a systematic review, and they had also searched in April 2016. So we felt that this was definitely a yes. Search. Yeah, so present full electronic search strategy for at least one database, including any limits used, such that it could be repeated. So this we thought that it must have been there in the appendix, since it would be too lengthy to include within the article itself. Study selection, state the process for selecting studies, example screening, eligibility included in systematic review, and if applicable, included in the meta-analysis. Okay, so here we gave it a no because we thought that this was mentioned, screening eligibility, definitely it was mentioned. But which studies went into only the systematic review and which studies went into the meta-analysis, like which went into the qualitative versus quantitative analysis. We thought that it was not explicitly mentioned.
Yeah, you are right. It is correct what you are stating. But I mean, when we have an individual patient data meta-analysis, it is clear that all the information we describe in the qualitative analysis is included in the quantitative one.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So this should have been a yes then. Okay. Data collection process, describe method of data extraction from reports. Example, piloted forms independently in duplicate, and in any processes for obtaining and confirming data from investigators. So this was definitely done. The all the data was filled up in a pre-formatted form, sent back to the authors for confirmation, and then used in the meta-analysis. So this was very well done. We all thought that. Data items, list and define all variables for which data was sought. And any assumptions and simplifications made. So we thought that all the outcome, death, success, failure, etc., they were mentioned, and other demographic variables, age, gender, etc., was mentioned. So we thought this was a yes. Risk of bias in individual studies. So they had talked about Robbins' I, tool for assessing risk of bias in the method section, as well as they've done it in the results section. So we thought that this was definitely a yes. Summary measures, risk ratio difference in means. So they have used adjusted odds ratio and risk difference. So that was also done, we felt. Describe the methods of handling data and combining results of studies, including measures of consistency. Okay, for each meta-analysis, this was also done. Right.
And I would like to highlight that the meta-analytical approach adopted for this analysis was a little bit different if compared with the previous one of the paper published in the PLOS Medicine, because in this case we perform a propensity score analysis in order to improve the homogeneity of the court, reducing the noise related to confounding features.
Right. Okay. So next, within method section, the last two word, item number 15 and 16, risk of bias across studies, publication bias, selective reporting within studies. So I'm sorry, we marked it. I marked it as a yes, but we thought it would be a no, because we could not find whether publication bias was reported.
Okay, I'll try to read.
So we could not find any funnel plot.
Yes, but probably it was included in the appendix. Yes, no, it isn't in the main test.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, you can understand that there are a lot of information after the assessment of this important database, and then it's very complicated. It's very difficult to summarize, keeping into consideration all the room provided by the journal. So at the end, you can write, but then the editor asks you to delete some sections. And so at the end, you have to fit the recommendations of the journal.
Right.
Okay.
So in additional analysis, describe methods of additional analysis. Example, sensitivity, subgroup analysis, meta-regression if done. So sensitivity analysis and propensity score matching, etc. was done. So we thought that this was definitely a yes. Within results, study selection, give number of studies screened, assess for eligibility, including the review with reasons for exclusion. So this was very well described in the Prisma flow diagram. Yeah, so this was a yes. For each study, present characteristics of which data were extracted, example, study size, PICO's follow-up period, and provide the citations. So we were looking for that. We thought that if it must have been there, but probably it is there in the appendix, because this would describe all the 87 plus studies. So if it were there, it must have been in the appendix.
Complicated.
Right. So risk of bias within studies. Yes. So Robbins I again, this was done, and they had classified into the different type of different grades of biases in the results section. They have done that. Results of individual studies for all outcomes considered present for each study. Simple summary data for each intervention group, effect estimates and confidence intervals, ideally with a forest plot. So this was definitely not there, but then again we thought that this is an IPD meta-analysis. So
Yeah,
probably
right.
individual studies would not be mentioned, rather all the patients data would be aggregated.
Because in this case, I mean, the difference between meta-analysis based on aggregated data and individual patient data meta-analysis, when you have individual patient data, you have, I mean, like a large sample, okay? So in a few words, you are using your data as coming from statistical units. You have follow-up in your hospital. And so there are a few differences, a few discrepancies in terms of outline between the meta-analysis based on aggregated data, individual patient data.
Right. Fine. Regarding synthesis of results, present results of each meta-analysis done, including confidence intervals and measures of consistency. This is consistency is, I think, the heterogeneity part, right? Yeah, right. So so this was there this was there for some of the outcomes, but we just wanted to ask you, like, it is there for the drugs like ethambutol, pyrazinamide, ethionamide. It is there given in the figure. So individual drugs they were given, but for some characteristics like age, sex, HIV positive, acid fast bacilli smear as given in table 2, this was not reported. So
yeah, you are right, because for the same reasons of the editorial rules, you can find the details of the analysis in the guidelines, where I mean, every recommendation was based on the results of the systematic review individual patient data meta-analysis. So the article has, I mean, the journal has its rules, and we deleted several parts of the systematic reviews. So your points are correct, but I mean, there is a sort of agreement. But in the guidelines, you can find all the computations on the results of the computation we did.
So regarding additional analysis in results section, the last point, item number 23, give results of additional analysis, sensitivity subgroup, meta-regression. So this was done. This was done. So this was a yes. Within discussion, summary of evidence, this was done. Summarize the main findings, including strength of evidence, consider their relevance. This was done. Limitations, discuss limitations at study and outcome level and at review level. This was also done. Right. And conclusions, provide a general interpretation of the results in the context of other evidence and implications for future research. This was done. And the funding part was also very clearly mentioned, that this was funded by the different societies. Right. So that's it. So we again, our conclusion was a very elaborate study. Yeah.
You did all of you an excellent review of the content of this article. Excellent, good. You did a good job. Hope, I mean, both my presentation and this discussion could be helpful for you. I mean, a sort of a trigger for future systematic reviews and meta-analysis. My suggestion, I mean, my recommendation is to involve a methodologist when you are going to plan to design a systematic review, because there are, I mean, some points which should be supported by a methodologist, not only the meta-analytical approach, but also the study design. And so if you don't have the specialization, the experience in this specific field, the risk of mistakes is high. So it's important to have in your team to invite a methodologist who has the expertise in this specific field. Because, I mean, discussing before the issue of MDR-TB, some of you told me that, yes, there is MDR-TB in my country, but I don't manage patients with MDR-TB. In the medical statistics, there is the same issue. You can find experts in a specific field, but not with the expertise in another field. So it is important to ask, to invite experts who have worked in this specific field, systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Okay, are there any other comments or questions? Hope you enjoyed the time together with me and with Stefano and Enrico, and
Yes, enjoyed.
hope to have the chance to cooperate with you in the near future. And you have my email address and my contact details if you want. I guess that Dr. Colombo provided my contact details. Otherwise, please send me an email and I'll give you my details for future collaboration in the near future. So thanks so much.
I'm sorry, if you still have time, may I ask one question?
Yes, sure.
Just short one. So for example, after we define our PICOs, and then we search for the article, and then we screen, and we found that the article who meet the inclusion criteria is only few, for example, like only 5 or 6. Is it still worth to continue the systematic review process?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
It's, I mean, is it a sign that maybe we put the PICO too specific, that it doesn't really?
No, I mean, if your question was a critical question for your clinical activity, is fine. If you find only a few studies, this depends, I mean, on the trend of the scientific literature. So it is okay if you find a few articles. 5 or 6 can be good. You can perform meta-analysis with only a few articles, at least 3. This is my suggestion for the pooling, but 5, 6 could be enough.
Okay, so at least 3 we can do meta-analysis, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So I wish you all the best. Thank you so much. And enjoy your evening and your weekend.
Thank you so
very
much for your guidance.
Thanks a
Enjoy your
lot.
evening. Bye.
Thank you.
So should we wait now or should we leave? What
So now, as Professor Soggio anticipated you, we will send you a survey to understand your feedback about the program, and then we will schedule with the mentors a conference call in the next weeks, just to maybe in a month or something. Just to have you know, a final sharing of the experience, and to understand if what you did during these 3 days could be helpful for your practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I will email you, and in this way you can also exchange the contacts with the mentors.
And Dr. Teresa, can Can we have the presentation of the presenter, the
Yes,
PowerPoint?
yes.
Thank you.
The 3 days has been recorded, so I will send you also the instruction to have a look at the recorded session.
Thank you.
Perfect.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much.
And
Thank you.
on the at the same way, you will have access to all the workshop session that you missed because you were in the FuHel program.
Thank you.
That's
That's
great.
lovely.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Bye.
see you next month.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you
Bye.
next
Bye.
time.
Bye.
Keep
Okay,
safe
bye.
and
Bye.
healthy. Bye.